It was a cold morning in January 2020 when the gates of 12 Rue Oudinot creaked open for the first time in decades. Nestled in one of Paris's most elite neighborhoods, the mansion stood in eerie defiance of time, an imposing structure with ivy-covered walls, crumbling balconies, and a quiet, unsettling presence. For nearly 40 years, no one had lived there. Whispers of its abandonment lingered among locals, but no one truly knew why a house of such grandeur had stood silent for so long. That was about to change. The estate, recently purchased for a jaw-dropping $41.2 million, was finally undergoing renovations. Construction crews moved in with their drills, blueprints, and dreams of revival. The halls that once echoed with the footsteps of aristocrats and diplomats were now filled with the hum of modern machines and the clatter of tools. But the house was not ready to let go of its secrets. In the first week of renovations, a foreman ordered the removal of rusted shelving in the damp, mold-ridden basement. Beneath a decayed wooden platform, something unexpected appeared, a torn piece of fabric buried under dust and rubble. What began as curiosity quickly spiraled into horror. One worker backed away in silence. Another swore he saw fingers. The foreman, thinking it might be an old mannequin or lost prop from the mansion's past, approached with a flashlight. But as the beam traced the edges of a skull and sank into hollow eye sockets, the truth hit harder than any wrecking ball. Everything stopped. The mansion was no longer just a renovation project. It had become the center of a criminal investigation. The body they found didn't belong to the grandeur of the house. There were no records, no warnings, no sign that this person had ever existed within those walls, until now. As police sealed off the area and questions spread like wildfire, one thing became clear. This wasn't just an accident, and someone, somewhere, had gone to great lengths to keep it buried. News of the discovery broke swiftly, though details remained scarce. Yellow tape now lined the gates of 12 Rue Oudinot. Police vans replaced contractor trucks. The rhythmic noise of drills and hammers faded into silence, overtaken by whispers, rumors, and the flash of cameras. To most Parisians, the mansion had always been a mystery, a beautiful ruin tucked away in one of the city's most affluent districts, long untouched, never sold, and rarely discussed. But now, it was front-page news. The official records told only part of the story. Built in the mid-1700s, the mansion had passed through the hands of nobility, war generals, and eventually wealthy industrialists. It had once hosted lavish soirees in candlelit ballrooms. But by the 1980s, the lights dimmed. Ownership became murky. Legal documents grew vague. The last registered owner, an eccentric aristocrat with a passion for privacy, vanished from public life before the decade ended. Then, nothing. The mansion stood like a frozen photograph of the past. Dust-coated chandeliers, faded wallpaper peeling away from cracked walls. A grand piano sat untouched, keys silently waiting for a player who would never return. It was this history that drew investors. The recent buyer, an unnamed billionaire rumored to be connected to international art circles, had acquired the property through a discreet auction. The sale was wrapped in confidentiality. Even the contractors brought in for renovation had signed strict non-disclosure agreements. But now, no clause could hide what had been uncovered. As forensic teams combed through the basement, authorities worked to identify the skeletal remains. Preliminary assessments suggested the body had been there for decades. Ribs bore signs of trauma. The skull had a deep fracture. The timeline, at least for now, pointed to a period just after the mansion's abandonment. How could a person die in one of the most watched cities in the world and remain undiscovered for over 30 years? It wasn't just a mystery. It was an accusation against the past, against silence, and against a house that had been hiding more than dust. But the most haunting question remained. Who was the man buried beneath the elegance? And who wanted him erased so completely? The body, now in the custody of forensic experts, began to speak. Not with words, but with wounds, with age, with time. The pathologist's early report was sobering. Male, likely in his 50s. Death occurred approximately 30 years ago. The bones bore signs of severe blunt force trauma to the ribs and at least 3 clean stab wounds to the chest area. No identification, no wallet, no clothing intact enough to suggest anything beyond poverty. It didn't take long for the word murder to enter the conversation. Investigators returned to Rue Oudinot with new purpose. What began as a renovation site had become a crime scene, and each creaking floorboard, every sealed door, now seemed to whisper of secrets long buried. Then came a breakthrough. Inside a rusted toolbox hidden in the shadows of the basement's far corner, investigators found what they were looking for: a torn coat button, an old cigarette tin, and a heavily water-damaged Polaroid. The image, barely visible, showed a man sitting near what appeared to be the gates of a Paris train station. Unkempt, weathered, alone. Facial reconstruction software and aging databases were put to work. Days passed, and then a name emerged: Jean-Pierre Renaud. He had once been listed as a missing person in the early 1990s. A drifter, known in some parts of Paris as a quiet, solitary figure who spent his nights on benches and his days wandering. He had no known family, no criminal record, no close friends. He had simply disappeared. And no one had looked for long. Now, nearly 3 decades later, his body had surfaced beneath the floorboards of unimaginable wealth. But how did a homeless man end up dead and deliberately hidden inside one of the most prestigious properties in Paris? Who brought him there? And more importantly, why? As the questions deepened, detectives began examining the ownership trail of the mansion, searching for anyone who might have had a motive to keep secrets locked behind its walls. What they found next would pull the case and the mansion's past into far darker territory than anyone had expected. As the forensic team confirmed Jean-Pierre Renaud's identity, investigators turned their gaze upward, from the basement to the paper trail. Who owned the mansion when Jean-Pierre died? That answer, it turned out, was harder to find than expected. The property had last been legally registered to a man named Charles de Vigne, a wealthy recluse from an old Parisian bloodline. Known among a shrinking circle of aristocrats, de Vigne was something of a mystery himself. He inherited the mansion in the late 1960s and was known for his obsessive privacy, lavish tastes, and sudden disappearance from public life in the mid-1980s. De Vigne's name was still on some of the older property records, but the documents became increasingly tangled after 1989. Shell companies, offshore accounts, anonymous trusts. The estate had changed hands on paper, but no one had physically lived in it. It was as if someone had been trying to keep it hidden in plain sight. Even stranger, no death certificate or confirmed obituary existed for de Vigne. He had vanished, without a body, without a grave, without a trace. Investigators scoured historical files, bank statements, and court archives. What surfaced was a troubling pattern. During the early 1980s, de Vigne had quietly begun liquidating assets. Paintings, vehicles, jewelry, all sold or relocated. And then, silence. It was as though de Vigne had anticipated something, or someone. But one document stood out. A 1987 maintenance report, signed by a private security firm, mentioned an unauthorized intrusion into the mansion's lower level. No police report was filed. No follow-up was found. But in the margins, in faded ink, were the initials, CD. That same year, Jean-Pierre Renaud had vanished. Coincidence? Perhaps. But now, a portrait began to emerge. A missing homeless man, a reclusive millionaire, and a mansion that may have served as the final meeting place for both. And still, No one could explain why Renault's body had been carefully hidden, not buried or discarded elsewhere, but sealed inside the basement of one of the most valuable private homes in Paris. Someone wanted him hidden, not gone. And as detectives pressed further into de Vigny's past, they would soon uncover that Jean-Pierre Renault may not have been the only one who vanished behind those walls. Weeks into the investigation, a new team was brought in, specialists in architectural forensics. Their task: scan the mansion for irregularities. If someone had been hidden beneath the house once, could there be more? They began by mapping the basement, inch by inch. What they found was alarming: an inconsistency in the floor layout. Beneath the main wine cellar, the ground-penetrating radar revealed a void, a space not listed on any blueprint. Hidden behind an aging wine rack was a bricked-up archway. It took hours to break through. Dust filled the air, and the smell, stale, ancient, almost chemical, poured out like something locked away for centuries. Inside, the room was small. Stone walls, dirt floor, no windows. A single rusted chain bolted to one wall. In the center, half buried beneath loose soil, was a second set of remains. Another body. This one was smaller, younger, still clothed in a tattered coat. A satchel with old documents lay nearby, almost completely destroyed by time and moisture. It would take days to even begin piecing together the identity. The silence that followed among investigators was chilling. The idea of one hidden corpse was disturbing. But two? In separate rooms? Hidden in different ways? This mansion wasn't a place of accident. It was a place of intent. Investigators began re-examining everything. de Vigny's friends, his staff, his rare public appearances. A pattern emerged. People around him had gone missing before. A maid dismissed in 1978 and never heard from again. A groundskeeper who vanished mid-shift in 1983. All brushed off as unrelated, unconnected events at the time. But now, the mansion whispered louder than ever. The elegant marble floors, the golden doorknobs, the velvet curtains. They had been the camouflage, and someone had been using them to hide something monstrous. Yet the deeper the detectives dug, the more elusive Charles de Vigny became. No photos after 1986. No confirmed sightings, no travel records, no taxes paid. He had erased himself, or someone had done it for him. And as authorities finally prepared to make their findings public, one anonymous phone call, placed from outside France, would send the case spiraling in a direction no one expected. The call came in at 2:13 a.m. A male voice, distorted and calm, offered only a single line before hanging up. "Check the study behind the fireplace. The truth is still there." Detectives returned to 12 Rue Oudinot under the cover of night. The mansion, now infamous across France, stood silent as ever, its grand facade betraying nothing of what lay within. Inside, the once beautiful study on the second floor remained mostly untouched. Dust layered every surface, and books crumbled from age. The fireplace was ornamental, or so they believed. Marble front, no soot, long unused. But the anonymous caller had been precise. With careful hands, investigators chipped away at the fireplace's back wall. A hollow knock confirmed the suspicion. Behind a false panel was a shallow cavity. Inside it, a leather-bound ledger, fragile, yellowed with time. No title, no markings, only initials etched faintly in the corner. C.D. Charles de Vigny's personal journal. The entries were fragmented, some damaged beyond recovery, but enough remained to redraw the outline of the man. He had grown increasingly paranoid in the early 80s. He wrote about voices beneath the floorboards, about being watched by those who do not belong. One entry referenced the man at the gate who would not leave. Another, chillingly, described silencing the drifter who saw too much. Jean-Pierre Renault, More disturbingly, several entries hinted at a personal descent into obsession with hiding what he called the rot inside the walls. Whether metaphor or confession, no one could be certain. But the writing grew more erratic over time. The final legible page, dated 1987, was short. "They are all gone now. The silence is complete. I will not be found. Not by them. Not by anyone." Charles de Vigny was never seen again. Some believe he died within the mansion, his body hidden in a place still undiscovered. Others think he escaped, vanishing into one of the many faceless identities he had built for years. But what remains undeniable is this: beneath the luxury, beneath the chandeliers and the million-dollar walls, lay two forgotten lives, erased from the world, silenced by a man who believed his wealth could bury the truth. And for nearly 30 years, it did. Until one day, in the middle of a routine renovation, the mansion spoke.